Hello beautiful friends, my name is Brittany, this is Rescues and Reads. Welcome back or welcome to the channel. I'm so glad this video found you. Today we are going to be building my August TBR, but my TBR for August is going to look a little bit different because I'm going to be using August as somewhat of a reading reset month. If you've been following my channel for the past several months, you will know that I am participating in quite a few reading challenges and doing quite a few individual reading projects, namely reading all of the Book of the Month, Book of the Year finalists that I haven't read since 2016. I'm also doing the Magical Readathon at HRYCED Academy from the very beginning. I did the Amazing Readathon in June. I'm doing our Fantasy Bingo. I'm doing all of the things. And as you can imagine, that has really firmly dictated my reading for the past several months. And during this time, a lot of books have been piling up on my TBR, namely anticipated releases that I haven't been able to get to and books that have come into my collection that I haven't read and really want to go ahead and read because as y'all know, if I have a book come into my collection that I haven't read yet, I try to get to those as soon as possible because I really do not want to be building up my physical TBR. I got my physical TBR down to 0 a few weeks ago. It's definitely no longer at 0, but it's still like below 10 and I want to keep it there. And so I'm kind of at a good space to do a reset because I have just finished the last HRYCED vlog. I have just finished the final book for the next Book of the Year finalist vlog, and I can pick and choose when I decide to start the next round of each of those. And so I want to go ahead and give myself a little bit of a break, especially because August is going to be a pretty crazy month. August is one of the busiest, most chaotic times at my work. It is almost nonstop. And on top of that, my next grad course is going to be starting on August 11th. And so basically from the 11th to the very end of the month, maybe even beyond, I am going to be an absolute stressed out mess. And the last thing that I want to have to worry about is meeting an arbitrary metric that I have set for myself with regard to my TBR. I am actually somebody who takes my TBR seriously. I'm not a mood reader. And so when I set a TBR for myself, when I'm playing my TBR game and all of that stuff, I want to reach that goal. I have come on here and I have made a promise that this is my TBR and I want to keep that promise to y'all. It's important for me that I do that. And so if I were to do that for August, I would definitely still feel that pressure. So for August, we are not going to be playing my TBR game. Unfortunately, I know that's going to be a disappointment for a lot of you. I'm so sorry. It will definitely be back in future months. We're just going to take a brief break from it in August. I will, of course, still be working on the mandatory reads that I already have set for August. And I will also be doing the HRYCED spinner wheel because I essentially have to be making progress on that every single month if I'm going to be successful at the challenge. But I'm not going to put a lot of pressure on myself for August, if that makes sense. If I don't get to some of the books for whatever I spin, that's totally fine. I'm just going to give myself grace in August because I just have a feeling that I'm not going to be my best self. Let's just put it that way. And so I want somewhat of a lighter month in August. So what we're going to do is we are going to talk about the mandatory reads that I have for the month. We are going to spin the HRYCED wheel, and then I'm going to talk about any other books that I'm going to try to fit in August if I absolutely can. But of course, first we have to talk about how I did with my TBR for July. So the mandatory reads that I had in July were my two Patreon picks. The first was The Drowning Woman by Robin Harding, which I did read and really enjoyed. I also had to read Undone by Karen Slaughter, the next book in the Will Trent series, which I did successfully read. I had already read the Patreon book club pick by that point, so I didn't have to worry about that. It was Atmosphere by Taylor Jenkins Reid. And then for the exclusive buddy read for the Archie tier, I had to read Heartwood by Amity Gage, and I did successfully read that. With regard to HRYCED, I of course spun 5 times. The first one that I landed on was to read a book that would satisfy the rainbow category, and ultimately I decided to go ahead and use Undone by Karen Slaughter for this because it's almost a completely purple cover, so I use that to satisfy the purple prompt within that challenge. I also spun the nonfiction, and for that I had started Alexander Hamilton by Ron Chernow. If you're not familiar, that is the very, very chunky, dense biography of Alexander Hamilton that inspired the musical, which is one of my favorite things on this planet. And so I wanted to go ahead and read the source material, and I'm not done with it. I didn't complete it, but I made it a fair chunk of the way through it. I would say that at this point I'm at 68 or 69%. So I am over halfway. I do see the light at the end of the tunnel, and I'm just kind of taking my time. I'm not even in a hurry to finish this. I'm just kind of like reading it when I can, when I feel like I have the brain power to read it. It takes a lot. It takes a lot of mental energy to read it. So I'm just reading it when I can, and I think that I'm making pretty good progress because I didn't necessarily even believe I was going to be that far into it by the end of June. So I'm definitely plugging my way through. For disability rep, I didn't have anything scheduled when I made my TBR. I didn't know what I was going to be reading, and I kind of read a couple of things naturally through the month that could satisfy the prompt. So for example, I read This Tender Land by William Kent Kruger. That features a main character who doesn't have a tongue, and so he has to sign in order to communicate. I also read The Ghostwriter by Julie Clark, and that actually features a character with Lewy body dementia, and that was actually something I was not really familiar with prior to that story. So I think I'm going to use that as one of the books that I'm putting towards the disability prompt. So I definitely satisfied it. Now I also spun Around the World Asia, and so that meant I had to read a book that was set in Asia or written by an Asian author. And I satisfied this, but I didn't satisfy this at the same time. I did the 24-hour reading challenge for HRYCED in July, and as part of that, one of the main things that I focused on were short stories written by Asian authors. But then I ultimately decided that because I was primarily reading short stories for that challenge, that I didn't really want to use them outside of the challenge. So I didn't ultimately decide to use any of those short stories for this like I had originally intended. So at this point, I have not specifically read a book to satisfy this prompt for HRYCED, although I technically could use one of those. So I'm going to leave this unsatisfied for right now. I'm going to try to roll it into August and see what I could potentially read to satisfy that in that month. And then the last spin was Heritage Month, Arab Heritage, and for that I completed A Woman Is No Man by Etaf Rum. And then finally, let's go ahead and get to the TBR game prompts. The first prompt that I had to satisfy was nature, so read a book with nature on the cover or in the title. I had to read 2 books to satisfy that prompt, and I read Heartwood by Amity Gage and again This Tender Land by William Kent Kruger. I also landed on the prompt of random color generator. That gave me like a deep orange color. For that, I decided to read King of Ashes by S.A. Cosby, and I did, and I loved it. I think it's one of his best. And then the very last prompt that I landed on was to read a book with a blue cover, and A Woman Is No Man by Etaf Rum absolutely satisfied that. So I had a very, very successful reading month in June. Now, before we go ahead and get into the HRYCED spinner wheel, let's go ahead and talk about my mandatory reads, and I actually only have one because, again, I have already read the Patreon book club pick for the month of August, which is The Ghostwriter by Julie Clark, which, as I mentioned, I have already read. We are also now moving into our next featured author for our author read-along. It is going to be Frida McFadden, and The Boyfriend was one of the books that won the poll for that, and I have already read The Boyfriend, so I don't have to worry about reading either of those. However, I do still have the buddy read that I'm going to have to satisfy in August. I'm going to be reading with my patron Caroline. We are going to be reading Rose in Chains by Julie Soto. This says, the war is over, the dark forces have won, and the hero who was supposed to save them is dead. Captured as her castle is overrun by the enemy, Brittany Rosewood knows that the world as she knows it has changed forever. The dark forces of Baumard have won, and her people, the Eversons, face imminent servitude, imprisonment, or death. Her brother, fated to be heir twice over and unite the warring kingdoms, is dead. Stripped of her mind magic and her freedom, Brittany and the other survivors are quickly auctioned off to the highest bidders in an auction, and as the heir apparent sister, she fetches the highest price. After a fierce bidding war, she's sold to none other than Tovin, a high-ranking Bamardson, and her long-time and ill-fated infatuation. Scion of a family known for their cruel control of heart magic, the Hearsts are ruthlessly ambitious, and Brienne knows that they will use her however they can to further their own interests. Yet despite the horrors of her new world and the roles she must learn to play, all is not lost. Help and hope may yet arise in the most unlikely of places. So I have heard really great things about this story. I'm really interested to get to it, and I'm looking forward to the buddy read. I just hope that I can pull it off, because right now my brain feels like mush, and the last physical fantasy that I tried to read was actually a DNF. It was kind of a disappointment to me, to be honest with you. I don't know if it was a me thing, if it was a book thing, I don't know what, but I'm just hoping to have a better experience with Rose in Chains. So that is really the only mandatory read that I have for August. All right, now that all of that is out of the way, let's go ahead and do 5 HRYCED spinner wheel spins. Nonfiction. Okay, so that is 2 months in a row that we are getting a nonfiction challenge. So this spinner wheel obviously really wants me to read nonfiction. Now, I'm not going to be starting another nonfiction while I'm reading Alexander Hamilton, but what I've found that I really enjoy doing is reading nonfiction at work. Like in the past, when I've had the bandwidth to do so, like when I'm not actively in the middle of a class or something, I will have a fantasy book on my nightstand to read before bed, and then I will also have another fantasy book going at work so I can kind of read more fantasies and get through them. But what I like about nonfiction is that they are much easier to put back down and dive back into, so I don't necessarily feel as guilty stopping them. Whereas if I keep doing a disjointed reading experience of a fantasy, I feel like that lessens what I take from the story, if that makes sense. And so I have found that I might be able to get through more nonfictions if I continue the pattern of reading them at work. And so I was actually planning on jumping into a nonfiction at work after finishing Alexander Hamilton, and I think the book that I am going to jump into, the one that was heavily on my radar for this nonfiction challenge, was Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer. This says, as a botanist, Robin Wall Kimmerer has been trained to ask questions of nature with the tools of science. As a member of the citizen Potawatomi Nation, she embraces the notion that plants and animals are our oldest teachers. In Braiding Sweetgrass, Kimmerer brings these two lenses of knowledge together to take us on a journey that is every bit as mythic as it is scientific, as sacred as it is historical. And the sun just disappeared. I don't know where it went. Drawing on her life as an indigenous scientist and as a woman, Kimmerer shows how other living beings, asters and goldenrod, strawberries and squash, salamanders, algae, and sweetgrass, offer us gifts and lessons, even if we've forgotten how to hear their voices. In reflections that range from the creation of Turtle Island to the forces that threaten its flourishing today, she circles towards a central argument that the awakening of ecological consciousness requires the acknowledgement and celebration of our reciprocal relationship with the rest of the living world. Will we be capable of understanding the generosity of the earth and learn to give our own gifts in return? And I just love the sound of that. This is a book that has been on my radar for many years at this point, but it's not been something that I've been brave enough to pick up just because I am not a nonfiction person. But I do think that this is the kind of nonfiction that I can absolutely enjoy. As somebody who has a deep respect for nature and animals, a deep connection, I would love to learn all that Robin Wall Kimmerer is willing to teach me. So it looks like I will be diving into this one after I finished Alexander Hamilton. When that will be, I don't know, but I will at least start braiding sweetgrass in August, assuming that I have the availability to do so with my grad course. If I don't get to it, if I don't start with it, I'm just gonna have to be okay with that. Okay, spin number 2. Okay, so I actually don't think that I'm going to be reading anything for this in August. Instead, I think that I'm going to be watching a movie that is an adaptation of a book. That was always my plan for the movie adaptation. I was always planning on watching the movie rather than reading the source material, especially if I have already read the source material. I could also do that for the comic/graphic novel portion because I was not planning on reading a comic or graphic novel. I was planning on watching an adaptation of one. This works out. I'm not going to read a book for this. I'm just going to watch an adaptation in August. All right, spin number 3. Cues, reviews, and recs. Okay, so this actually works out perfectly because this was actually the other prompt that I was going to use braiding sweetgrass for. I was going to use it for nonfiction and cues, reviews, and recs because she has done both a full-length vlog and I think mini review for this book. And so I'm easily going to be able to use this for that. So that is not going to add another book to this. So that works out perfectly as well. Okay, spin number 4. Rainbow challenge. Okay, I love this for me because that is going to be another one that is super, super easy to satisfy. I have a couple books on my radar that I think could absolutely satisfy primarily the blue color prompt for the rainbow challenge. I don't feel the need to select anything right here, right now for this. I'm going to easily be able to satisfy this in the natural course of my reading in August. So the spinner wheel is being very, very kind to me. All right, and then the final spin. Fantasy subgenre. All right, that absolutely works out because like I said, I'm going to be reading Rose in Chains, which I do believe is going to be either a fantasy romance or a romantasy if you distinguish between the two, and I'm hyped for it. So again, I'm not adding anything additional to my TBR because I'm going to easily be able to satisfy this in August. So out of all 5 HRYCED spins, I'm only technically adding 2 books to my TBR because one is going to be the new nonfiction and then whatever book I'm going to use to satisfy the rainbow challenge. I was already reading Rose in Chains. I'm not going to be reading anything for the adaptation. I'm going to be watching an adaptation, and I was already planning on using braiding sweetgrass for the cues, reviews, and recs prompt for the challenge. So that worked out beautifully. I cannot tell you how incredibly thrilled I am with how nice that wheel was. So now let's go ahead and talk about all of the other books that I'm going to try to get through in August just because I really want to read them. They are anticipated releases or they are books that I have here in front of me and I just really, really need to get to. So the first one we are going to talk about is With a Vengeance by Riley Sager. This is Riley Sager's newest release. It came out in early June and I have still not read this book. Am I procrastinating on it a little bit? Yes, and that's just because I'm a little bit nervous. I know that this one's going to be almost entirely historical. I think that it's a different take on like a locked room mystery. I think it's going to kind of like harken to an Agatha Christie style story, and I'm just not sure if I'm going to enjoy it. One of the things I love about Riley Sager is also one of the things I hate about Riley Sager, in that he is not afraid to dip his toes into a lot of different subgenres of like the thriller/mystery field. Some are definitely faster paced and more twisty than others. Some are more of a slow atmospheric burn, and you just never truly know what you are going to get. And I'm not sure how I'm going to feel about this particular story. I'm not going to talk about it too much just because I have mentioned it multiple times prior to this point in several other videos, but this is one that I just need to go ahead and bite the bullet and get done because he is one of my favorite thriller authors. He is hit or miss for me. I do know that. I don't expect to love every single book that I read by him, but for some reason this makes me nervous. But in all honesty, I just haven't had an opportunity to get to it yet. And so I think August is going to be that time. Similarly, I still need to read Lisa Jewell's newest release called Don't Let Him In. This is actually a book that I mentioned in my last TBR video because I was going to potentially use it to satisfy the blue on the cover prompt that I landed on for my TBR game. And again, it was also going to potentially go towards the Rainbow Challenge, neither of which happened. But if I did read that in the month of August, I could absolutely use this cover to satisfy the blue Rainbow Challenge prompt because this is almost an entirely blue cover. Lisa Jewell, again, is one of my favorite thriller authors. I think that she's just so incredibly talented at creating these very creative, crafty stories that typically have multiple viewpoints, multiple timelines, and they just weave together so beautifully. And so I'm very much looking forward to getting to this one, and I really hope that I am able to in August. And really quickly, I'm gonna go ahead and take some time to film my battery because the last time my battery died while I was filming a video, none of the footage copied to the memory card, and so I lost a whole video that I wasn't able to refilm, edit, or post. So we're gonna go ahead and take a minute right now and change the battery, and I will be right back. Okay, we're back. Another anticipated mystery release that I really want to get to in August is The Woman in Suite 11 by Ruth Ware. This is the follow-up to The Woman in Cabin 10, and I'm really excited. This just says, Lo Blacklock returns to attend the opening of a luxury hotel, only to find herself in a white-knuckled race across Europe. I'm here for it. I actually really enjoyed The Woman in Cabin 10, although I know that's kind of an unpopular opinion, but I'm really looking forward to seeing what Ruth Ware does with this. I have pretty much read Ruth Ware up to 0 until this point, except for maybe like a short story that she has out there, and I'm going to continue to read her because I really do tend to enjoy her stories, and I'm sure that this one is going to be no different. So this is definitely another high priority for me. And then finally getting into the books that I actually own at this point, another very blue new release thriller that I want to read, You Belong Here by Megan Miranda. Now, Megan Miranda, again, is a very hit or miss author for me, but I don't know, I have this really complicated relationship with Megan Miranda because I'm always so intrigued by the synopsis of her stories, but I don't necessarily think she executes all of them very well. There have been some that I have really enjoyed and others that have just been huge letdowns, but her release last year, Daughter of Mine, was so good. It was impeccable. The atmosphere, the vibes, the execution, I loved it. And so I really just want to continue giving her a chance. This is another one that I'm not going to say too terribly much about because I have talked about it before, namely in a Book of the Month prediction video, and that's actually where I got this copy from, was Book of the Month. But I do believe that this follows a main character who has a history with this specific college. I believe that her parents went there or something to that effect. Something went down at this college and she never thought she was going to have anything to do with it ever again. But now her child wants to go to this college and things are going to happen. Secrets are going to be revealed. I don't know. I'm just going to trust the process for this one and I'm looking forward to getting to it. Next, I have the books that came into me with Arvars July subscription and I haven't touched one of them and I really need to. So first we have House of Beth by Carrie Cullen. Now this was actually the book that I was going to read in July for the disability representation if I didn't read anything else that would satisfy that prompt. Unfortunately, I did not get to this one, but I am really looking forward to this. This is a horror novel and I do believe it follows a main character who ends up reconnecting with her high school best friend Eli, who has lost his wife. And so she and Eli reconnect and they end up getting married to each other. And so she becomes a stepmother to his children, but she never feels quite right. She never feels like she's living up to his ex-wife. And on top of that, she also experiences harm OCD. And I do believe that she is going to start deteriorating within the story, that she's going to hear voices and things like that within the house. I'm not entirely sure what's going to go down, but I'm here for it. I'm not a big horror reader. I'm not entirely sure what to expect. And I haven't loved a lot of the horrors that I've read, but again, I'm going to go into this and trust the process and really hope that I enjoy it. Another one that I picked up for Aardvark and I did talk about in the Battle of the Book Box video that I did for July was Salt Bones by Jennifer Givon, another horror that I was really intrigued by. I'm just going to read this blurb here. It says, 3 women in one twisted family race for answers in this gripping retelling of Persephone and Demeter set in the Mexicali borderlands. It says that this combines elements of Latina and indigenous culture, family drama, mystery, horror, and magical realism in a spellbinding mix. I just think that sounds absolutely phenomenal. We hear a lot about Hades and Persephone retellings, but not necessarily about Persephone and Demeter, and I'm just now realizing that I may be able to use this as a modern retelling for the adaptation prompt. Let me know what you think about that, because maybe I will be reading a book for the adaptation after all. A book that I picked up for Aardvark in July, and I actually forgot to mention within that book box battle video simply because I was focusing on their main selections, and this was a backlist title, Death of the Author by Nnedi Okorafor. This is a book that really has been going all around the online bookish community. I've never read anything from this author before, but this sounds really interesting. I think that it's going to be kind of like a sci-fi thriller. This says, disabled, disinclined to marry, and more interested in writing than a lucrative career in medicine or law, Zilu has always felt like the outcast of her large Nigerian family. Then her life is upended at her sister's lavish Caribbean wedding when she's unceremoniously fired from her university job, and to add insult to injury, her most recent book is rejected by yet another publisher. future. With her career and dreams crushed in one fell swoop, she decides to write something just for herself. What comes out is nothing like the quiet literary novels that have peppered her unremarkable career. It's a far future epic where androids and AI wage war in the grown-over ruins of human civilization. She calls it Rusted Robots. When Zilu finds the courage to share her strange story, she does not realize she is about to embark on a life-altering journey, one that will catapult her into literary stardom, but also perhaps obliterate everything her book was meant to be. From Chicago to Lagos to the outer reaches of space, Zilu's novel will change the future, not only for humanity, but also for the robots who come next. A book within a book that blurs the line between writing and being written, Death of the Author is a masterpiece of metafiction that manages to combine the razor-sharp commentary of Yellowface with the heartfelt humanity of Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. Surprisingly funny, deeply poignant, and endlessly discussable, this is at once the tale of a woman on the margins risking everything to be heard and a testament to the power of storytelling to shape the world as we know it. Now, I will say that there are definitely some things within the synopsis of this that give me pause, right? I'm not always a big fan of books within a book because I do feel like it can typically take you outside of the story. It compares the commentary of Yellowface, which is one of the reasons why I haven't read Yellowface, is because I don't want the commentary, and also the emotions of Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, which I had a lot of problems with. I actually hated the characters in that story, and I do believe that the main character in this is supposed to be really, really unlikable. So I honestly have no idea how I'm going to feel about this. But again, I was kind of feeling FOMO because so many people were reading and absolutely loving and raving about this. And this, of course, has a lot of diversity. It's going to be written by a BIPOC author, which I can use for HRYCED. It's got disability representation, which I can use for HRYCED. It's got a lot that I would be able to use for the HRYCED challenge. And I don't know, I just love this cover. I think it sounds fascinating and I really want to give it a shot, although I will be listening to it. And I really hope that what happens in here does not go over my head. If you have listened to this, please let me know what your thoughts are. All right, and then the last book that I really feel that I want to get to in August, if I can hack it, is the next book in the Assistant to the Villain series by Hannah Nicole Mayer called Accomplice to the Villain. I read Assistant to the Villain, I think it was in early last year, and I was floored by how much I loved that story and those characters. I just absolutely had the best time. I loved all the characters. I was laughing, kicking, screaming. I loved Kingsley with my whole heart and soul. I loved the dynamic between Evie and the villain. It was one of the only cozy fantasies that I've ever read and really enjoyed. And then I read the sequel to it called Apprentice to the Villain, and I didn't love it as much, but it had so much of the same signature things that the first one did, and I still really enjoyed it. And I'm looking forward to this third one as well, and just revisiting the characters and seeing what they're up to, getting a little bit more of Kingsley and seeing the relationship between Evie and the villain progress. It's just so wonderful. It's so wonderful. And I'm really looking forward to being back with these characters. Those are all the books that I would love to get to in August if I can manage it, but I am not going to be pushing myself. If I don't finish any of these books in August, that is absolutely fine. I do not know how much I'm going to be reading in August at this point. Honestly, I'm just going to kind of let how I feel dictate whether or not I pick up a book, because I do not want my reading experiences of the books to be impacted by my stress level or anything else that is going on. So I'm just going to take it a little bit easy. And I will also say that I am going to let my reading be slightly dictated by the holds that come in from my library. So I definitely do have a lot of holds at my library that are for projects, that are for the Book of the Year project, that are for the Aurelian project, that are for also another project that I haven't spoken about before and I haven't really made any progress on in weeks. I don't know if it's going to continue or come to fruition, but if any of those books come in from the library, I may just go ahead and listen to them. So I'm just kind of going with the flow for the month of August, and we are going to see what I can get to, but I will definitely be prioritizing Rose and Chains by Julie Soto. I will be starting Braiding Sweetgrass once I've finished Alexander Hamilton, and I will also be reading a book to satisfy the Rainbow Challenge. So as long as I get those 3 things done, I will consider August to be a success. Anyway, y'all, I feel like that was a really chatty TBR video. It probably ended up being really long, so I apologize about that, but if it did, I hope that you at least enjoyed having our special guest. He likes to join me if you haven't been able to tell. He's been featured in a few of my videos recently. He wants all the snuggles and he does not like when I'm filming and I cannot give him the snuggles. But anyway, if you have made it to the end of this video, please let me know what books you are looking forward to in August. I would love to know, or if you have read any of the books that are on my TBR, let me know your thoughts. Or if you've made it to the end of this video and you are not feeling chatty, go ahead and leave me a cat emoji in honor of Sir Archibald Fergus Augustus Tillotson. And as always, if you like this video or if you just like me, please be sure to give it a big thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already. I typically post 2 videos a week, one on Wednesdays, one on Sundays, and I would love to connect with you in any of those future videos. Y'all know how much I love interacting with you in the comments, but if you would prefer to connect with me outside of BookTube, you can always find links to my Goodreads, Instagram, and Patreon linked down below, along with any books talked about in the video. Until next time, y'all. Bye.